Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today is the president and founder of Go Brewing, which is an award-winning, non-alcoholic, small batch craft beer company. But before starting Go Brewing, he started Dealer Inspire and launched digital marketing. So truly went from pixels to pints, and then exited both of those companies to cars.com. So we have very many entrepreneurial things to discuss, but welcome to the show, Joe Chura.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What did I miss in the introduction? I just gave a very fast introduction, but how do you introduce yourself?
Oh, that is actually a really good question. And I identify as an assembly line worker, blue collar worker that grew up on the southeast side of Chicago and worked at the Ford plant for many years as I worked my way up through the Ford ecosystem into marketing and sales, which gave me an opportunity in the early 2000s to convince car dealers the internet wasn't going to be a fad, which allowed me to stair-step my way into building a digital marketing company for those car dealers and then a software company. And it all started off because I found out I was going to be a father when I was 19. I had a daughter when I was 20. At the time, I couldn't even take care of myself, to be honest with you. And here I am. I'm faced with the reality of having a child in the world that with responsibilities that were just very new to me. And it was like one of those stories where her whole family worked at the Ford plant, and I had friends that worked at the Ford plant. Kind of reminds me of like a movie with a steel mill town in it. You know, everyone's just kind of there. That's just how it was. So it was very obvious that if I needed a good job, like that's where I would go first. And that's exactly what happened. I needed a good job with benefits. I needed to grow up really quickly.
So you spent almost 10 years there, truly going rung by rung by rung by rung, well, like working your way up. So that wasn't part of the master plan. You really just kind of like tripped into it.
Yeah, and that's just a big thing I talk about when I speak to anyone, is that the dots in life connect backwards, and it makes a lot of sense. But as you go through things, you really don't know what you're facing. And it's looking at the opportunity in front of you and how do you make the most of those opportunities. And I would not be where I am today if I wasn't faced with that adversity when I was younger and having a daughter. Not only did that force me to grow up, but it forced me in an amazing industry in automotive, where I was able to grow up, learn everything from building cars on the assembly line to seeing engineers work within the plant, to then being in the marketing and sales team, to then sitting with the CEO of Ford Motor Company, and then eventually leaving after 10 years to become a car dealer out of all things. And it would have never happened. It was like, you know, you're faced with something and you do your best with that. And then you start to think about what are the possibilities that I have at this moment. And I'll say that the lesson I learned really early on was that my dreams were limited by an environment which I was in. So I'll unpack that for a second. I was building the 1998 Ford Taurus at the plant. Cars were rolling down the assembly line at 72 cars per hour. So they go really slow. They don't like stop and go, they go really slow. And as I was putting on the seatbelt, the B pillar, the scuff plate, all these different parts on the car as they were rolling down, I would stare across the car and I would see supervisors that would wear radios. And my dream in my early 20s was to be them. Like, I was just like, this is the height of my aspiration. One day I'm going to be a supervisor, and it's still an amazing job today. It was my dream because that's all I saw. That's the environment I was in. That was like the epitome of the plant. And the only way to get to that position was for me to go to school. So I would enroll in school and I would read my textbooks in between building these cars. As they would roll down the assembly line, I'd read 15 seconds at a time. And I did that 72 times an hour for 5 years. Like, it wasn't like this like summer job. And I graduated magna cum laude. I'm not even a good like academic student at all, but I taught myself this really interesting way to study, and that's in these little increments instead of being a human robot and coming back to my station and watching TV or looking at something really quickly, I decided to take that time and maximize it. And it was such a happy accident at the time that I learned this methodology, but it really propelled me to the life I have today.
I love that shout out to micro learning opportunities. And I also love the assembly line background because as people talk to me about entrepreneurship, they say, well, what's your experience like in entrepreneurship? And I'm like, I am chef, cook, bottle washer, floor sweeper. And when you're starting something from the ground up and you have to do all of the dirty work across the whole company, it kind of gives me that throwback look to, when you start from the bottom and you're truly doing everything to get to like the next step, the next step, the next step. So that's amazing that you truly started from the assembly line of Ford and worked your way up. So when you had the opportunity to get the dealership, did you see that as entrepreneurship or you just saw that as like, this is my next step?
To be honest with you, I saw it as an opportunity to make more money. At the time, I had been at Ford for 10 years, and those that may remember 2008, 2009 were pretty tough years for the automotive industry. You had something called cash for clunkers and like all of these government programs to stimulate the economy and car sales. And at the time, the Ford basically, even though I was a high performer, they basically had salary freezes. And I got my real estate license on the side and I started selling real estate. And then one day I was called into my boss's office and I disclosed it, but it started to like take off. And he was like, hey, you have to choose. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be stuck here, I'm not going to have the ability to make any more money, then I'm going to choose to do something else. And that's when the opportunity to join a car dealership and potentially be a partner in a car dealership came to fruition. But those were really 2 hard years to jump into retail automotive. So I learned a ton about being an entrepreneur then, mainly about like cash flow and learning how to be lean and dealing with people. I had never supervised that amount of people before, and just all different walks of life. And then you have the customer dynamic. And so there's just a whole bunch of things that came at me at once in a very challenging environment.
And then how long before you started your true entrepreneurial effort of starting Dealer Inspire and launch digital marketing?
So it was a couple years. I went through a really low point actually at the very end of 2009 where I started to regret the fact that I had left my job at Ford, mainly because I had 10 years there. And at Ford, if you have 30 years, you can retire, you have a pension. So you had all these benefits. So I gave a lot up to take this chance. But I was also suffering from debilitating back pain. And it was to the point where I couldn't even stand. I was on all sorts of pain relievers and just things that aren't good for you. And then finally, it got to the point where I literally couldn't walk anymore. And I had emergency surgery at the end of 2009. When I was recovering, really, it was like December, January of 2009, 2010. I was just like contemplating what I was going to do with my life and just really like in probably the lowest state I'd been in a very long time. And I was recently married and all of that was good. It was just like my purpose was really lost. And that's when I started to get into digital marketing and my passion and try to tie it in with automotive. So I knew though I had been into computers since I was a kid. I've been programming on the Commodore 64. My brothers would play video games. I would get a book and just like literally write these programs that would take me all day for a spaceship just to go back and forth on a screen, and just really like love that side of it. So when the internet was just starting to take off in the early 2000s and I was talking to car dealers, it was just this natural thing that I had the opportunity to learn a lot about how marketing and the digital advertising landscape would affect the car business. So I started to listen to podcasts as I laid in my bed recovering from back surgery. And I decided to build this website called Ford Employee Plan. There's probably a remnant of it right now. And I taught myself how to do search engine optimization. So I was like, okay, if I want to learn this, I better do it. And that's just another thing. Like it's easy to talk about doing things, but until you actually do them and learn yourself, it's just not the same. So I was like, I'm going to build a website from scratch. I'm going to optimize it. And the whole goal is to educate employees. This seems like a crazy niche on the benefits that they get for buying a car and the discounts they can receive. And I built this calculator on the website, and I put all this organic content in there. I did a video with the plant manager, and the website started to get a ton of traffic. And it started to rank number one for terms like Ford employee plan, Ford employee discount, above Ford Motor Company. And I was like, man, there's just something here. And then I put Google AdSense on there. So for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it is a code that Google will give you. So if you go to Google AdSense, you can sign up for it. It's a code. You could put it on your website. And then anytime someone clicks on, it shows ads that are relevant to that user. So if you're visiting a website, it's going to show an ad. Doesn't matter what website you're on, that's relevant to you. And if you click on that ad, the website owner, in this case me, gets paid money. And then Google charges the advertiser a markup, and they keep that difference. And that's one of many ways Google makes money. So I did that, and I started making money. I started making like passive income of like $500 to $1,000 a month. And I was like, and I built this website in a week, and I'm like, I'm going to try to pay for my kids' college through this thing. So I started to add a little bit to it. And then those dollar amounts went up. And that was really kind of the start of, man, there's something here. And it was like, this was 2010. If I study this and obsess about it, maybe I could sell this offering and help car dealers show up on the internet for terms like best Ford dealer in said state or whatever, any kind of long tail search that someone's typing in, because it's very relevant. And that's exactly what happened. Me and two people got together, and we created an agency called Launch Digital Marketing. And all we were supposed to be initially was a SEO company. And that was really the packages that we sold, is to help dealers show up in search.
And how long did you play this game with Launch Digital Marketing?
So it started in 2011. By the end of 2011, we had about 30 employees. 2012, that number grew to about 60 employees. And then I started to see the writing on the wall that a lot of the efforts that we were doing to drive traffic to dealers' websites, because that's what you're doing, right? You're showing up in search, but someone clicks on a link in search, and then they go to a dealer's website. Well, those dealer websites were inadequate. Like they did not look good. They didn't perform well. There was no analytics on there. And this one day, this dealer who had been purchasing our services for like 2 years calls me in his office, and his name's Bob. And he goes, "Hey, Joe, you know, I've been paying you $3,000 a month for 2 years now. Show me one person that bought a car. Show me their name." And I was like, and I started playing sales guy. I'm like, "Bob, we doubled your leads. We tripled your traffic." And he goes, "Yeah, but show me someone's name." And I couldn't do it. And I could not show him someone's name because the internet, and the websites just didn't work like that. They were all like anonymized. But I'm like, I bet I could figure that out. So thought about how to actually make that happen. Long story short, decided to build a website that had this attribution angle on it, but it was a beautiful website that looked good, had HTML5 video on it, just was like completely different than what was out there. More and more like dealers saw that, and it was only meant for our marketing clients to be able to be a stable digital marketing company. But then others started to see it. And then I was like, wow, this could be a business in itself. Well, along the way, I learned from podcasts how to create a company, and if I ever wanted to sell it, how to set it up, and really kind of started to study like Silicon Valley and like how do software companies get created compared to marketing companies, and they were far different. So I ended up listening to this podcast, This Week in Startups. I listened to like 100 episodes. The attorney that advertised on there ended up hiring him and gave me a startup package and really set me up in a big way, and built a separate entity called Dealer Inspire. So we had two entities, and they fed off of one another. So the more marketing clients I got, the bigger Dealer Inspire got. In 2013, we had 3 employees at Dealer Inspire, 60 at launch. By 2017, we had over 450 employees. And by 2018, I sold both companies for a good amount to cars.com.
So Launch Digital was mainly SEO focused, and then Dealer Inspire was more like web focused, or what was the dividing line between the two entities?
Yeah. So if you think about launched digital marketing was it turned into a digital marketing agency. So anything from paid social back in the day to writing social content to videos to really anything to drive traffic and awareness for car dealers. That's what launched it. Dealer Inspire was mainly if anyone watching this would Google their nearest neighborhood car dealer, like an OEM, like a Honda dealer, a Ford dealer, chances are today on the bottom of that site, it'll say made by Dealer Inspire. So that's the company that I had created. So that was the first product we built. Over the years, we built live chats. We built this online software to be able to buy a vehicle online or get as far as you possibly can, and a few other different software pieces. So Dealer Inspire was the software arm. Launch Digital was the digital marketing arm. But they were separated for two reasons. The cap table was different, so the ownership structure was different in the two companies. The second reason was I knew the multiple on a software company would be much higher than a marketing company. From educating myself for no other reason than listening to these podcasts and these founders come on and talk about things and talking to a lawyer and doing all that stuff. So that's why I created two separate entities. I ended up selling them both to cars.com. So they wanted both companies because it really made sense at the time to have them both.
But you did set it up so they could have been sold separately, or they could have
Right.
you could have sold one. So you almost intentionally started an ecosystem that could be sold as an ecosystem, or it could be unpieced or taken apart and sold as pieces.
Correct. Yeah. That wasn't really the intent. The intent was for me to create a separate software company in a way where if I held the stock for a certain amount of years, I could benefit from a tax advantage. And that is why that separate entity was created at the time. And again, kind of the ownership structure was a little bit different than the marketing company. And that's the way it went down.
And so then you're 10 years into this ecosystem, or approximately 10 years into this ecosystem, and you're approached by cars.com, or you approach cars.com. How did the exit come to be?
10 years, because 2013 is when Dealer Inspire was created. 2018 is when I sold. So it was literally like not even 5 years where the conversation started to happen. So what happened, and something I'd recommend to anyone, is to get on lists. They might seem arbitrary, but we would sign up for like the Inc. list, or in this case, there was the Cranes Fast 50 list. And the Cranes Fast 50 was who are the fastest growing companies in Chicago. Well, in order to qualify for that, you have to be around for at least 5 years. Launch Digital was old enough because it had a head start on Dealer Inspire, but Dealer Inspire was really growing a lot faster than Launch, but it wasn't eligible to apply. So Launch Digital won in 2017, I believe, the Cranes number 5 fastest growing company in Chicago. And that is really what got us on the map of investors, people like cars.com, is because they saw that and then they double clicked and they were like, wait, what's this other entity called Dealer Inspire? Well, at the same time this was happening, our client base was changing at Dealer Inspire. So our early clients were car dealers that we could, like, your neighborhood car dealer, and they were great. And we would send them an invoice and they would pay us within 15 days. Well, over time, we started to get manufacturing deals. So now the invoices didn't go to these car dealers, they went to manufacturers. Well, you can guess what happens then. It's, we don't get paid in 15 days, we get paid in 115 days. Well, we were pretty much a bootstrap company. And not only did we have to shift that, we also had to absorb all the marketing spend that was happening, where dealership would absorb it themselves on their credit card to get points. So I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here, but the reality is we would do, in 2017, we did $150 million with Google. We did, 80 million with Facebook. All of that money had to be absorbed by us now, instead of the dealer just paying it off right away. So it changed the dynamics of cash flow, and our business was growing like crazy. It had nothing to do with that. But when I looked at the business, we were cash poor because of our growth. And I was like, okay, so I have a couple choices now. I could raise money and hope that this just keeps going, or I could sell the business, or I could sell the P. I was just trying to explore my options. So I ended up hiring an investment firm to just analyze our business. Well, at the same time, they gave me the valuation and the ideal partners for both companies was when Cars.com organically came and approached us. And I got a phone call from the CEO saying he'd like to meet, and he heard about us, and he came out and met me, saw our facility, saw everything we were doing. And at that point, it just seemed like it would be a great partnership.
This is a Cinderella story of entrepreneurship. Is there anything in those two businesses or in those two timelines that went wrong or that you had to pivot around? Or was it truly just one of those unicorn stories where like this all just came together beautifully?
Oh my God. It's like, it was a shit show every day. Like, it was like, and this is the thing about, I think, life. It's like, it's so messy until the end. And then you look at it and you're like, just think about like adolescence or working out, and just think about anything that's hard. It's just messy. It's messy when
Yeah.
you run a marathon. You do these disgusting things. Like, but at the end of it, you get a medal. It was like that. Like every day we were at, like, it was so risky because we were playing with fire. Like I would have to pay $1 million in payroll or $1 million to Google. And if I didn't pay Google, then we would be shut off. Like they would shut our dealers off. Like, and I didn't have millions of dollars. So it's like having a conversation with them. So we were so close so many times to like being defunct from a cash perspective, even though we were rocking it from all intents and purposes. I mean, we were at like
Yeah.
500% growth every year. So
Yeah.
many things happen like that every day. And now you're dealing with hundreds of employees. There wasn't a day that went by that something bad didn't happen, but you started to get used to it. And you're like, okay, what's going to happen today? And it started to become like, not a game, but like you can expect it.
And don't you feel like your tolerance changes also? Like maybe when you're starting out, you kind of feel like everything is a huge fire. And maybe as you exited, you were just like, everything's on fire always and it's fine.
Yeah, you definitely build calluses around this stuff. And it's very interesting because I feel so fortunate to even be able to tell the story. Like it is a Cinderella story from the fact that like I'm a South Side Chicago kid and just really kind of maximized every opportunity in front of me. And I was smarter than anyone else. I just happened to take the time in between doing things, and I still do it today, to learn and educate myself. And what I found is that the internet is such a wonderful place with the ability to educate yourself on any topic you want to get better at. And I happen to love digital marketing. And
Hmm.
because I loved it, it didn't feel like work to me. So I naturally was drawn to it. My wife would be watching Bravo and I would be sitting there coding because that was fun to me. And one day she turned to me and she goes, "Why are you always working?" I'm like, "This is what I do for fun. Like, you're doing that for fun. This is what I'm doing for fun." And it
Yeah.
truly is. And that's where I feel so blessed and so lucky. And I also thought that success was so different because people would say, they would see this company growing and they're like, "Man, don't you feel so successful? Look at this. I had 30,000 square foot office. I had hundreds of employees that, for all intents and purposes, like really liked me." I mean, for the most part, you always have those outliers, and just had a really good rapport with my team, my clients, and everything. And you looked on the surface, you're like, man, those guys are doing it right. But like, I was like, never say I'm successful because I'm one action away from this all going the wrong way.
Yeah.
And until I sell it, that's when I could like at least say I did something. And then I ended up selling it and I still felt the same way. Like it was such a weird feeling that I'm like, this is it? Like, now what? And you get this high and this low, just like really anything that you've you've worked for. Like if it's your wedding, it's the day after. It's like, oh my God, all that anticipation and now it's gone. And your dopamine level crashes. It's like all that stuff is a real thing.
So I know you stayed on with cars.com and you're still involved with them in some capacity, but I want to jump to Go Brewing because you have the exit, you have that push and pull of like I should be super excited, but I'm not. There's still something out there, and so how do you decide to truly go from the like the
Mhm.
pixels to the pints, and like why beer? Like what was the decision making around this is what I'm going to do next?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can say that it was a series of little moments that happened to lead me here today. A few of those were watching the demise of my father in 2006 from alcoholism and drugs, and then watching my brother try to survive a weekly. He would end up in the hospital. He had major issues with alcoholism, and
Mm.
he was 4 years younger than me. So I was watching this stuff happen. And then I was watching friends that were passing away. And then I was starting to notice myself, for many reasons, just like be drawn to wanting a drink at night and on the weekends. And it wasn't like I could have one or two drinks and be fine. Like I would want more. I would want 4 or 5, and I would do that multiple nights in a row. And I was looking at my kids, and I was just looking at like myself as a role model. I'm the leader of these companies. I felt this obligation to be better. So my wife and I, we would often say, and I joke about this a lot, the diet starts Monday, and then Monday would come, and you're great Monday, and Tuesday you're good. By Wednesday, you're doing the same shit, and it just happened over and over again. Well, COVID hit, and they gave us the worst excuse to just drink more. And all of a sudden I look at myself and I'm overweight. My blood tests are crazy. I'm just like, okay, I'm not heading down the right path. So decided to do a challenge where we abstain from alcohol for 75 days, amongst some other things. I felt amazing. I felt like I had superpowers. I felt more clarity than I ever had in my life. I felt I had less anxiety. My skin started to change. I thought I had perpetual bags under my eyes. They went away. And all these things started to happen. And I was like, oh my God. And I realized that I hadn't not drank the most I ever went was like 3 days, 4 days. So 30 days into it, I started to feel remarkable. But I still had these massive cravings for beer. And I found non-alcoholic beer just curbed my craving. It just went away. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And then I would wake up in the morning and I'd be so grateful that I didn't drink and that I had any beer. So that was like one big piece. The other piece, in studying the category and looking at the emergence of non-alcoholic beverages, was that you can sell them online. Well, you obviously know from the background that I just talked about that I had a passion for that, and that I love to do that. So it really kind of blended perfectly with my purpose and with something I love to do. And all of a sudden, when I started dabbling into it, I'd get lost, and I would be like, my favorite time was to put me in a corner and let me build email flows for this new business for $10, like nerd stuff.
Yeah.
And
You're super fun at parties, aren't you, Joe?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's I too, but like, I love to just build things. I love to create things. I love to test things. And it's just like, that was just like what I really enjoyed doing. And then I started to feel my purpose again, because as the company grew, I went away from that stuff. I started to be more of an HR director, and like,
Mhm.
I'd have to coach people all the time. And like, that was okay, but it started to get wearing after a while. And now I was just like back to like what I loved. And that's kind of led us to create Go Brewing. When I had the idea, I ended up hiring a brewer who became a co-founder, and started with my friend Bruce too. And now my friend Chris is involved, and we just like built this thing organically from my garage, because that's the one missing piece in creating this. I didn't know how to brew anything. All I knew about drinking was I was good at drinking.
So what's the timeline around Go Brewing? So the idea for it started during the pandemic. So when did
Yep.
you really start to file and create this team?
Yeah, 21 was when really the idea started to manifest itself, and some things happened that the universe was like, yeah, this is the right direction for you. I then was like, okay, well, the big blocker is we don't know how to make this beer. So when I decided that this is go time, I pun intended, I put out a job posting for a head brewer, even though I didn't have a company yet, even though I didn't have anything. And in that job posting, I said, we're creating the non-alcoholic brewery. And this was still like like when NA was cool. I think now it's starting to emerge as like this cool thing to try. But
Mhm.
it wasn't like that then. And I got a few calls, and I ended up meeting who became my head brewer, James Bigler, and a co-founder. And I didn't even know what to ask him, honestly. Like, it was more of like my gut feeling from having so many employees over the years, and just like feeling
Yeah.
something out, and just asking questions about like, is he inquisitive? Like, can he figure this out? And he had never made
Yeah.
any beer before, but there's something in me that was like, this kid needs a chance, and I think we can do this. And I also looked at it as like we were fortunate enough for me to remove excuses of like, oh, we can't afford this equipment, or we can't do X, Y, and Z. Like super fortunate to be able to not have those blockers or to be relying on fundraising. Let's just get to the first step of this, which is like building this brewery in my garage, and let's see where it goes. That is so key, I think, in life, is like you can take that first step and then start to explore, be like, hey, is this worth it? Am I having fun? And if you are, take that next step. You don't need to go out and like go all in on something until you start to make sure that it's right for you.
Yeah, action breeds the next opportunity. I think that's critical, is like taking a first step, even if it's a small baby step. And it sounds like you kind of took some jumps. But as you look back at your time at Launch Digital, what lessons did you learn with those two digital and car-centric companies that are applying to or are applicable to Go Brewing now?
So much. It's countless. The DNA of those companies is now all over our company now. In fact, I have a lot of core team members that have transferred over here because I just love them. Like they're just like the greatest people. But I'll say some core things that is our philosophy here. And what I really liked and what I did at DI is very simple. We had a very simple mission, DI meaning dealer inspire. And it was, we would attract dealers with innovation, but we would retain them with service, and we retain them with being excellent at getting back to them, communication, and so forth. I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you buy something online, it's not like always a great experience. Like it shows up whenever it shows up. If you have to get a hold of someone, it's hard. We remove that friction. So we have 2-day shipping. So everything online that we do has the standard of being excellent. And we have an SLA to respond to customers within 2 hours, 2 business hours. We don't have a huge team. We just created processes to really focus on that. That's the service side. But innovation, I would say, is the styles of beer we make, is the innovation platform that we've created to have our own brewing facility to be able to do things where we're not reliant on contract brewing. And this was like a bit of a happy accident that I didn't know that a lot of people in the NA space, they don't even make their own beer. They just hire someone else to make it. Well, it gives us an advantage that we make our own. So that's a big thing. Another thing is speed wins in terms of communication, in terms of taking action, in terms of like looking at how someone feels on the other end, whether that's a distribution partner, a retailer, a customer, an employee. Like you have to be quick, you have to respond. And then it's really just taking those small steps and doing what's in front of you really well to then give you the opportunity to take that next step. So tons of, and a little bit of that's like hyperbole, but like and I could get into examples of all of it, but it's like, those were like some core things that we brought over here. And just the way that we're thinking about how to optimize all these channels that beer didn't have 5 years ago. Such a huge opportunity to use data to our advantage and to segment customers in a way where, you never really saw in the space, because people were never delivering beer in the way we do. Like we did 35,000 online orders last year. We have a database now of people we can market to in certain geographical areas. And so when we open retail or distribution in a certain market, I already have a customer list that I can say, we're in this store now.
It's reminding me almost like a liquid death model, where they built their online community first and they went direct to consumer first. And then as they sorted through some of their brick and mortar distribution, they knew they had the direct to consumer figured out on the tail end of it. And to me, it's fascinating, because you just completely broke out of a traditional like beer distribution model.
Yeah, we have both. So we have the beer distribution model, like Liquid Death would have distribution partners that deliver their water. We have distribution partners that deliver our beer. But it's this beautiful omni-channel where you have people that buy on Amazon and they recognize our brand name, then they go in the store. They go in the store, they go to our beer club. They go to our beer club, they go buy online. They buy online. You know what I mean? It's just like this really cool interweb that we've created. And what I'm so fortunate to have is I call them like liquid billboards. Even like before we enter a market, we're in people's fridges. Like they're talking about us. We're part of the conversation. And
Yeah.
we focus so much on our product and product quality that we have a 50% retention rate. So 50% of the people that buy from us buy again. So it allows us to do a little more in marketing that we would otherwise, if we didn't have that kind of quality, we wouldn't have that retention rate, and therefore we wouldn't be able to market like we do and advertise.
What trends are you seeing in the marketing space, or what are you seeing that's working for you as you're trying to market Go Brewing?
We're trying to go deep in a couple areas versus go really wide and shallow. So we go pretty deep on Meta in terms of the direct to consumer side. We go deep on Amazon. So I don't advertise on TikTok, or I don't advertise on other mediums. I don't do too much with Google now, very little. It's mostly we're all in on Meta.
Mm-hmm.
Then from the traditional side, for lack of better words, we're all in on out of home or billboards. So I'm not doing a little bit in billboards, a little bit on TV. I'm just really focused on that and being really excellent at both of those things. And then we look at email and some of these communication ways to get people back into our online website, which is huge. And now we have over 1,000 beer club members, so 1,000 subscribers that get a monthly package. So that's, our goal this year was to be at 600 in dry January. We blew that out of the water. So it's like, it's retaining those customers, being able to communicate to them, and really just trying to do a good job for them and to try and come out with really good beer that they're excited about. This is like an amazing time because people are in discovery mode. They're discovering new brands of non-alcoholic beverages, and people are proud to share those brands that they're finding. And it's been a lot of fun to be a part of that, and to get tagged in photos, and to make someone's day, and to get a text that we help someone with the sobriety, and all this stuff. So it's so meaningful, and it's beyond just like surface level stuff. It's like truly like messages come in like, you helped me get through a really troubling time in my life, and to have that be a product that we created out of my garage a couple of years ago is pretty cool.
So you're about 3 years in. Where are you going to be when you hit the 5-year mark with Go Brewing?
I don't think of 5 years. It's so bad. I do so many things that are unorthodox. I don't create business plans. I don't create 5 years, 5-year plans. What I do is I look at like what's in front of me. Like I looked at a car in front of me, and I was like, I got to read that paragraph. And I know if I do that well, I'm going to get to that next step. So I can tell you that by the end of this year, we have at least that mapped out. We'll be in 19 states in distribution. We're already in some major chains. We should hopefully be coming to Texas by you soon, and we're going to keep integrating our stuff with national sports events, concerts. We just became a partner with Riot Fest. We're partnered with High Rocks, some bigger marathons, and we're just going to involve ourselves where it makes sense, and just try to create the best product possible, and put our head down and try to think differently about the space.
To kind of like back out a little bit, what advice would you share with someone who was considering entrepreneurship?
Find something you love, because you're going to spend a lot of time in it. And if you don't love it, I think it's going to be really tough. Like if I was doing like if you said, hey, Joe, go figure out how to build car washes, like that could be someone's dream, and that's amazing. But for me, that wasn't my dream, right? Could I be good at it? Maybe, but like it's not my passion, so I'm not going to spend so much time on it. If you could find something you truly love, and you're kind of in a flow state when you do it, you're gonna have a much more likelihood to win. So I think that is like so critical, because it is hard. Everything is against you. And if you're not having fun doing it, it's going to make it so much harder, and it's going to be so much easier to give up. By far and away, do that. Once you do that, then you could take that next step.
And then one more piece of advice for people you kind of alluded to earlier, like some dark times. Like talk to me about like a comeback season where you were in a low and you really had to pull yourself to get into like where you're going to be next. Like what were some of the things that you maybe did to get yourself out of that comeback season?
Yeah, I would say that mood follows action. So if you remember that, it's just taking a step in the right direction. But I've been in dark places, very dark places, regarding the business, regarding even Go sometimes, to be honest with you. Like there's a part of me where if I wanted to play things safe, I got in the worst business I could possibly get in. Like it is very, very competitive. It's very, very expensive to do what we're doing. And it's very time consuming because I created, and it's very constraining to being in a physical geographical area. So
Yeah.
meaning like we have a brewery in Naperville, Illinois, outside Chicago, and I have to be here for that. So there's some days when I'm like, what did I do? Like, why would I have done this? And then there's other days where I'm like, I'm a genius. And then there's many times I'm just like in the middle. And what I would say to that is, I heard this before, but Olympic athletes, the way they approach training is 1/3 should suck, 1/3 should be amazing, and 1/3 should just be like, you're just training, you're in it. And that's how business, I think, is too. Like 1/3 of the time, you're going to be like on a high, like having these wins, high fiving, you're going to get these dopamine rushes. 1/3 of the time, you're going to be like, I am the biggest idiot in the world. Why did I do this? And 1/3 of the time, you're just going to be building. And it's, if you over index or under index on one of those three, something's off, I think, and just like getting through each day and understanding that it's never as bad as it seems and it's never as good as it seems. That is so huge. But there's so many little things that have happened that I would say that the backstory that I alluded to in 2009, 2010, where I was just on Percocet laying down and just like contemplating everything, was probably the lowest time. And it just took me getting up and that one step and finding something I loved, which is how to build. And I'll say there's no excuse either. Like if you have access to the internet and you have time, like it's just like a matter of like, do you want to do it? And if you don't, that's cool. But on the other end, like, you can take that free time that you have, whether that's going to the grocery store, throw on headphones, listen to a podcast, listen to them on your way in. Like, so much information out there, and there's so much good content that you can learn anything you want nowadays.
I love that you learn via podcast. I definitely learn via podcast also. And I think the ability to self-teach, whether it's via podcast or YouTube videos or books, that's the best ongoing learning that you can invest in, more so even than an MBA. Like, you need to have a cadence of ongoing learning, even if it's that micro learning that you initially talked about.
Oh, 100%. I have podcasts that I listen to that are about direct to consumer stuff. And then I have other ones that are about business, and you're just always learning. There's just so much out there, and there's so many smart people in this world, and the ability to like hear from someone in another country that has a viewpoint that you never considered within seconds of them thinking about it is real. Take advantage of it. We're in unprecedented times, and there's really no excuse for being able to maximize your potential.
Is there anything that's top of your mind that we didn't get to talk about yet?
I would just say, if you are in a position where you or yourself or someone else needs to cut back on drinking, give non-alcoholic beer a try. Even if it is it's something that you've tried in the past and it didn't work for you. And it's not just our beer. There's many great companies out there that make really good stuff. And I think the ability for you to find an alternative, it just like the ability for you to learn online, is much more relevant today, and it's a lot easier than it was. And again, it's like a really cool time of discovery for these beverages. So we've collected, just on a side note, nearly 4,000 surveys from customers on our website. So 0-party data. When someone purchases, we ask a question, and 80% of them or 60% of them drink and want to cut back and want to drink in moderation. 10% are just curious, and then the other cohort like just doesn't drink anymore or can't drink. So it's really interesting what's happening out there, and people are experimenting with sobriety, or people experimenting with cutting back. And it's not a binary thing. Don't feel like you have to take a stance in the ground. Like, I still drink in moderation. It's not that. It's just like, if you're getting these cravings and you're drinking a little too much during the week, like, just substitute it with any beer and see how you feel.
Joe, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. I'm going to link all the Go Brewing information in the show notes, and I'll link all of your social channels as well, so that everyone can follow along with you and your founder stories. But we really appreciate you coming on this episode of the Society Pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jessica.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.